I am pleased again to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Nabil Belmeki from the University of Morocco, whom we will receive with great enthusiasm. Dr. Nabil Belmeki is a Moroccan researcher and writer. He obtained his PhD from Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah University of Fes in Morocco. He is currently a professor of English at the Higher School of Technology, Moulay Ismail University of Meknes in Morocco. He serves as a rewriter for international journals such as the International Journal of Language and Literary Studies, International Journal of Education, Culture and Society, the International Ecolinguistics Association, and the Public Journal of Semiotics. He's a frequent participant at the scholarly conferences in Morocco and around the world, including Lithuania, Spain, and Egypt. He also translates articles and books from English to Arabic and from Arabic to English. His major research areas comprise visual semiotics, discourse analysis, and language education, among other aspects. Dr. Nabil Belmeki will expose the topic Rethinking Education in the post-pandemic era, a need or a necessity. With you, Dr. Nabil Belmeki.
Thank you very much. I would like first to share my screen with you. So is this clear?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Morocco. I'd like first of all to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me here today. It's an honor to have the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience, and thank you very much for the presentation. As you can see on the screen, the paper entitled Rethinking Education in the Post-Pandemic Era, a need or a necessity. It is actually co-authored by Dr. Nabil Belmeki and my friend and colleague, Dr. Miniani Noureddin. In this presentation, I would like to talk about the online education during and after the pandemic or the COVID-19 crisis. Actually, I have organized this talk in the following way. Very quickly, I will drive you to a general background, the topic, and then research objectives and methodology, and move on to data analysis and end up with some recommendations. Actually, I present the results of this paper. And before I talk about students' perspectives of online learning during and after the pandemic in Morocco, I would like first to give an overview of the Moroccan experience of online education during the pandemic. So the pandemic, or the COVID-19 pandemic, has had a wide-ranging impact on people and communities all over the world. This unexpected crisis has had an impact on every aspect of society, including education. For about 30 weeks, schools were closed because of the sudden COVID-19 pandemic. Educational institutions were forced to immediately switch from face-to-face education to online education, and both instructors and students naturally performed the teaching and learning processes in a virtual environment. In response to this exigency, all Moroccan educational institutions were required to offer remote education or e-learning for the academic year 2020-2021. The educational process was restarted digitally using platforms developed by online education and communication tools such as Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, and WhatsApp. Actually, computers, laptops, cell phones, and tablets have supplanted board and chalks, ushering in a new world that appeared out of nowhere. Regarding students in higher education, each university has added a box in each platform where the students can find the day and time of the course online. It is also linked with Microsoft Teams and Classrooms. These are secure platforms that facilitate teamwork via video conferencing, file transfer, and instant messaging between the team or let's say work group. The rural areas are deprived of distance learning because these platforms do not meet their minimum requirements in the countryside. For this reason, the Ministry of Education Morocco said that there will be kind of channels of television broadcasting aimed at providing educational, let's say, content to the largest possible number of people, especially those who do not have access to the internet, and added that the broadcasting will be done through Moroccan, let's say, television stations. While all these measures might seem reasonable, but if applied in, let's say, a country where abject poverty represents more than 45%, according to the World Bank, more than 54% in rural areas, these measures will seem rather ridiculous. On the one hand, most families in urban centers lack reliable access to the internet, and only a lucky few middle-class families can afford the monthly data package subscription. Even these families are suffering, let's say, because most have more than two children and only one family computer makes it rather difficult to manage their learning time without straining the device. So let alone shed a light on people living in rural areas who lack basic access to modern life utilities, including essential infrastructure, electricity, and clean water sources. So this is the general background about online education in Morocco during the COVID-19 crisis. Now I would like to move on to my research objectives. As we know that the arrival of COVID-19 has put all educational parties under pressure. It has greatly affected students and teachers as well. Students were baffled and puzzled about how to cope with this sudden transformation since they have not been acquainted enough with online learning. This has dramatically influenced their performance during the pandemic. Moreover, there were many concerns about how students' performance will be after the pandemic. So the aim of is to make sure students will not relive the same ambiguous experience anytime unexpected things happen. Therefore, this research or paper seeks to explore the situation of learning and teaching in higher education during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. It also examines the relationship between the COVID-19 pandemic and students' academic performance. Additionally, it investigates the impact COVID-19 has brought about on the Moroccan educational system, especially in higher education. Furthermore, this research or paper attempts to examine post-pandemic influence on students' performance. On top of that, the study explores Moroccan higher educational institutions' willingness and keenness to cope with online learning and engage, let's say, in digitalizing education. For my, let's say, research methodology, the questionnaire is the best suited method for our data collection, and it's well appreciated by all let's say, students. And the research sample was chosen actually at random. A link to a questionnaire was distributed to electronically through email and social media to a large number of students at the Moulay Ismail University in Meknes, Morocco. Actually, the questionnaire is divided into 3 sections. The first includes 4 questions about the student's general background. The second consists of 10 questions about students' perceptions and performance while using online learning during and after COVID-19 or the COVID-19 crisis. Finally, the third section is composed of 3 questions. 2 questions about the relationship between COVID-19 and students' academic performance and digitalization as the future of education, and 1 question concerning students' attitudes toward the implementation and integration of online learning after the pandemic. Actually, our sample is composed of 175 undergraduate and postgraduate students who belong to the Higher School of Technology of Meknes, ESDM, National School of Arts and Crafts, the Higher School of Teachers, Faculty of Arts and Human Sciences, Faculty of Sciences, and Faculty of Legal, Economic, and Social Sciences at the University of Moulay Ismail in Meknes, Morocco. So the objective actually behind this choice is to have, let's say, or to provide different views of students from different levels of study. For their social, let's say, status, they are from the upper, lower, and middle classes. The motivation behind this investigation is to get an idea about students' ability to afford technological, let's say, devices to cope with online learning. And let's say, getting to know their gender background. Students are aged between 17 and 35 and are of both sexes, 63% females and 37% males. Now let's move on to data analysis of this research. For data analysis, or this section, actually, the aim of this section is to present students' point of view on the use of online learning during and after the COVID-19 crisis. As results confirm, as you can see, almost all participants, means 90% used online learning during the pandemic. However, the rates of use varies, okay, according to their purposes and needs. Thus, we have 22 use it all the time, 34 usually, and 32 sometimes. Here is another interesting question to students. What platforms did they use, let's say, during the COVID-19 pandemic? It is worth noticing that WhatsApp received the highest percentage. The second platforms that were made use of are Google Meet and YouTube, followed by Zoom and Google Classroom. This data implies that most students opted for the most common platforms they are already familiar with, namely WhatsApp, Google Meet, and YouTube. So another interesting question, how did you find online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic? So during and not after, means not now. So this question highlights the extent to which online learning is gainful and effective. It is remarkable here that about 68% of the participants or students admits its productivity. beneficial. It is beneficial. However, only 32% of the participants see no benefit in online learning. This actually can be attributed to the lack of students training and incapability to cope with online learning. And this requires, as we will see later on, the government to provide training for students who are unfamiliar with these new pedagogical and technological issues by taking into account the different requirements and materials for each subject. So how can you describe your performance during the COVID-19 pandemic? So here, another interesting question to see how their performance or achievement increased or affected by the use of these platforms. It is clear actually that the majority of students benefited a lot from the use of online learning during the pandemic. So we may think that they didn't benefit, but actually the results, okay, against our expectation, and it helps them to increase their achievement. And the same thing here, when we ask them the same question, but to describe their performance after the COVID-19 pandemic, which means now, after the reopening of schools, how they see that. And we can see it is remarkable also that they use, but that their performance improved, their achievements increased after COVID-19 pandemic, which means that they benefited from the use of online during the pandemic, and that didn't affect them negatively, but they affected them positively. It is actually interesting to know also that the majority of students are still using online platforms after the reopening of schools. So we asked them this question: do you use online learning after the reopening of schools? The majority of them say yes. So about 50 or 76% say yes, we are still using these platforms. And it is remarkable that about 60% of the participants admit the productivity also and the benefits of using these platforms. So another interesting question addressed to students or participants who belong to Moulay Ismail University in Meknes, Morocco, students belonging to different institutions and schools in Meknes, we asked them this question to know about the relationship between COVID-19 pandemic or COVID-19 and their academic performance, whether it has an impact or effects on their academic performance or not. And actually, it's quite interesting to see these results. For example, when we ask them about their feeling and whether their performance improved, the majority of them agree and they say, yes, I feel that my academic performance, as you can see here, my academic performance improved during the pandemic. And we asked them the same question in another way: how COVID-19 pandemic affects your performance? Is it positively or negatively? The majority of them said, yes, we benefited a lot. It affected us positively. Another interesting question: I have acquired or learned many skills and competencies because of COVID-19 pandemic. As you can see here, 51.28 of students say yes or agree that they have acquired and learned a lot of skills and competencies during the pandemic. So thanks to COVID-19 pandemic, students realized that their achievement, their competencies, improved. Another interesting question: online platform or online platforms facilitated my learning process. So 41% agree. They say, yes, they facilitated our learning process. So in general, it has been realized that online learning is working in favor of university students during and after the pandemic, especially among those who study at open access institutions. There are some institutions or schools, call them open access institutions. Students are not obliged to attend classes, you just need to take the final exams. So here, online learning is good for them. Why? Because they can get the courses, the lessons from their teachers, and some teachers use or create YouTube channels and their own platforms and upload videos of their courses, their subjects, and share them with their students. And this is good for students who belong to these open access institutions. Another interesting question, we asked them to know about their perspective, attitude toward the use of, let's say, online education in the future, whether they are ready to opt for, let's say, online education after a crisis like this, or they are not ready for that. So I see that digitalization is the future of education. The majority of them agree. We have 43.58 agree that yes, digitalization is the future of education. Without, because this is the era of technology, government institutions, policymakers should think of implementing and integrating these technological devices into their university programs or higher education in general. I think we should adopt online learning as normal as face-to-face learning. Also, the students agree that we need to adopt online learning as we do with face-to-face learning. Another interesting question here, we first need to be introduced to digital literacy. This is interesting to know that students think that they are ready for online education, but they need help. They need someone to help them. It's like they are requesting the government to promote, to encourage them to be able to use online learning by providing training, professional development, technological devices, facilitating the matter for them in order to enjoy the learning process by using online education. This implies that they are not against online learning, as we may think, but they need someone to help them if they find the requirements, the material, so they are ready to go with. So I cannot afford to buy the required technological devices to go online. This is interesting. We didn't find a lot of students who agree with this, because I think that the majority of students used and experienced online learning during the COVID-19 and use platforms, easy platforms for them, like Google Meet, WhatsApp, Zoom. These devices, I think were, let's say, easy for them to use because they experienced that and they have smartphones and they didn't find any difficulties while using these devices. That's why we have the majority of them are neutral. So 42.30 are neutral and they don't know whether they cannot afford, because actually they can afford to buy these requirements at the moment, but they don't know about maybe other platforms or other technological devices they may need. But all the platforms or the technological devices they used in the past, so let's say, were available for them and easy to get. So I would like to end up by providing some recommendations. Actually, the following recommendations should be given priority in the short term. There should be research more on the situation of each student, each level and each institution. The university life of students should be investigated. Universities should have also partnerships with laptop, mobile phones, and internet connection companies to provide special offers to students and teachers. Teachers also should prepare lessons and deliver them in different formats. Universities should organize lessons in, let's say, an accessible way, and the government should provide free access to educational platforms. It is highly recommended that distance education should take the needs of individuals with visual impairments. Written material will not be suitable for this category of people. Also, the government should invest a lot in time and money in infrastructure and training. Student training should train students and provide them with, let's say, required training to know how to cope with online education at the university and outside. Also, we can talk about hybrid learning. We have to encourage hybrid learning and teaching from now. We should not wait till another crisis happens, let's say, and then we will be obliged again to close schools and opt for the learning, let's say, or distance education. But we should think of that from now and be ready for any unexpected, again, crisis. Also, the government should encourage, or institutions or in the universities should encourage teachers to create, why not, YouTube channels and Facebook pages to be, let's say, in daily contact with their students, because as we can see, as we know in Morocco, some teachers took the initiative and, let's say, created YouTube channels and share courses with their students. So especially this is good for students who don't attend classes or enroll, let's say, in open access institutions and are not required to attend classes, to learn and better understand the course from, let's say, their homes. So I hope my presentation or my paper, let's say, provide a general background about Moroccan experience during and after COVID-19 pandemic. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
We are grateful for this excellent presentation by Dr. Nabil Balmeki. Indeed, digitalization is thought to be the future of education. We are receiving several questions from the audience to be answered by our speaker, Dr. Balmeki. The first question is, according to you, which type of education is more effective, face-to-face or online? What do you think, Dr. Balmeki?
Okay, thank you. Can I answer now? I answer each question?
Yes, please.
Okay, interesting question. Which type of education we can choose? Actually, we cannot decide, because as I said, we have to, let's say, investigate each student, each level, and each institution. Frankly speaking, before I conducted this, let's say, research, I thought that students would not encourage using online learning and will be against, they will not agree that online learning will be effective. But the results, I think, for me, shocking, especially that majority of them think that they are ready for online learning if the government provides them with requirements, materials, and help them to do so. So it's not a question of face-to-face or online learning, but that depends on the context, depends on the institution, and depends on the subjects itself, because there are some subjects which required face-to-face, and there are subjects which you can learn outside the university, and then you can take the exam, and maybe you succeed if you carefully understand the lesson. So that's why, in general, I think the government, especially that crisis, don't, let's say, inform you or don't tell you when they will happen. One should be ready for any kind of crisis and should opt for hybrid learning teaching, the kind of mix between face-to-face and online learning. So especially in Morocco, after the pandemic, I think some institutions in higher education institutions, especially open access institutions like Faculty of Letters and Faculty of Legal, Economic, and Social Sciences, still use online or distance education. They upload YouTube or let's say videos. They upload courses in their websites, platform given by the university for students who don't attend classes. So it is effective, but it's not the case with, for example, other institutions. For example, School of Arts and Crafts. It's technical, and students should attend, okay, classes because they need to practice and because it has to do with crafts and arts. So that's, for me, depends on the institution and kind of students enrolled in that institution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernanke. We have a second question. What difficulties have you encountered during online classes, and what can we do to avoid them?
Yes. So for yes, difficulties is sometimes you need to talk, let's say, with your students. If you need, for example, to send them PDF formats or upload videos and share that with them, that's fine. But when it comes to real live, for example, meetings, we find it very difficult, especially if you have, for example, just think of 60 students. So it's difficult to know who is with you, who is following, who is present, who is concentrating, and we know the effect, of course, of technology. We can talk about connection, we can talk about network, we can talk about visual aids, talking camera, microphone. These are some limitations, some problems that we can find, especially if you want to go live with your students. That's why one of the recommendations I have mentioned is that the government should invest maybe in creating other platforms easy for use for both teachers and students. And we have another problem with assessments, how to assess and to evaluate students online. So this is another, that's why research or researches should be conducted in this way to find other pedagogical and methods and ways of, let's say, teaching and learning in order to improve these processes. So to overcome them, I think the government should, let's say, intervene and provide interesting, let's say, and alternatives platforms.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a lot of students it's difficult and it's really a problem. Thank you for your suggestion. We have one more question. In your opinion, what do you think is the best strategy for a teacher to apply when teaching virtually?
Actually, this is an interesting question, but it's very difficult to answer. That depends on the teacher, depends on the subject. For example, teaching English, so we can say it's interesting. We can use that very easily. For example, you can assign a public speaking presentations for students and ask them to work on that at home. And why not ask them to deliver their presentations online? So, or video record themselves and send you their presentations. That's fine. But when it comes to subjects which need, let's say, attendance, students should attend classes, should touch material, devices, tools, especially with students of science, students of arts and crafts. So it is very difficult to opt or to, let's say, apply these methods. That's why I said that teaching online doesn't replace face-to-face education, doesn't replace, but it assists. Okay, it assists, it helps teachers and both students to cope with and then to improve their and increase their achievements and improve their academic performance. That's fine, but to replace 100% face-to-face education, it's quite impossible at the moment. I cannot say it's impossible, but for the moment it's impossible because of the kind of let's say subjects we have, because it's going to be applicable with some subjects and cannot be with other subjects.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your advice. The next question says, do you think that the teaching learning methods used by teachers improved after the COVID-19 pandemic?
Actually, the result of my study, let's say, shocking, because I thought in the past that they couldn't help or improve their performance, but when I distributed the questionnaire to different students belonging to different institutions belonging to Moulay Ismail University, they stated that they improved positively, and these platforms facilitated their, let's say, online learning. So we cannot guarantee 100% all students improve their academic performance, but at least the majority of students who experienced COVID-19 pandemic last year and now think that online learning works in favor of these students.
Thank you very much. And this is the last question for you to answer. According to your experience, do you consider that there was an advance or a setback in the teaching learning process of the students?
Yes, please, can you repeat? I didn't hear you perfectly well. Yes.
Of course. According to your experience, do you consider that there was an advance or a setback in the teaching learning process of the students?
I think that's also, let's say, online or COVID-19 affected teachers, both, not only students' performance, but also teachers' performance. Because there are some students who are not acquainted with the use of these platforms, but because of COVID-19, they were obliged to do so, because they had to send, they had to, let's say, evaluate students, and you cannot evaluate students without, based on, without, let's say, delivering in a course. So that's why I think the teachers also, let's say, were affected by COVID-19 pandemic, and they were obliged to conduct researches and, let's say, to plunge themselves in training to know how to use these platforms effectively in order to improve the academic performance of their students. But it's not actually enough, because the government should intervene and help them with professional development and training in order to, let's say, deal successfully with online learning in the short term or in the near future.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Belmeki. We sincerely acknowledge your participation in this important event. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the whole Department of Social Human Department, we are going to give you a diploma. Thank you very
much. Thank you very much for inviting me. My pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much.